Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Brought to you by the fine people at Khaki, soon to be Polyhymnia, probably already Polyhymnia. You know, there are legal things that you have to do. You've got to sign a bunch of papers, and lawyers have to tell you it's okay to call yourself something. I don't know what the problem is, but there always is one.
Oh, yeah, and wait until tax season next year.
Don't get all right, stop. Stop. Anyway, what's new and exciting in your world this weekend?
My news this week comes from voice authentication startup Pindrop Security. They recently posted a job advertisement and got a bunch of candidates. One candidate stood out from hundreds of applicants. This applicant, named Ivan, seemed to have all the right qualifications for the senior engineering role. When he was interviewed over video, however, Pindrop's recruiter noticed that Ivan's facial expressions were slightly out of sync with his words. And that is because Ivan was using a deep fake. He got an AI to generate a face and a voice in real time. And that's what he was using for the interview.
I mean, on the one hand, I want to hire him even more. On the other hand, I never want to hire him.
Well, it got me thinking, because on the one hand, you say, well, clearly this is a problem. He's showing a face isn't his, a voice isn't his, and so forth. But if this is going to be, which it sounded to be, a fully remote job, he's only ever going to interact with people via video. How is this any different than, for example, wearing a suit to the office, or maybe getting voice lessons or plastic surgery? Do something to make yourself look different in real life. I don't see that this is any different. It's all electronicized.
I don't know. Putting on an electronic skin seems somehow different from getting a facelift.
Well, I don't know. I would go to wearing a suit. I mean, you get dressed up in a suit and tie to go to the office. Where else do people wear suits and ties? Virtually nowhere else. So you could say you're putting on this persona, you're putting on this look specifically for the office. This is, granted, it's steps further, but it seems to be of the same type.
What happened with Ivan?
Well, Ivan was given the boot once they discovered that he was a deep fake. In fact, it went further than that. They did some investigation, found that he was actually a scammer. So this was not the case. But you could imagine, a case in which maybe someone is socially awkward or, is uncomfortable with his looks or something, and he goes and he does this thing. It seems to me to be, I don't know, in some sense reasonable.
Well, let me lay this one out on you then. There is a bit of a corollary here that came to my attention a couple of days ago. There's a guy, I don't know how far along he is in the process, but he's developing, or he has developed, an application that utilizes AI to help you, or do for you, I guess would be the most likely thing, but to help you write texts to potential romantic partners. Now, this drives all the way down to my common observation that when you're dating somebody, you're not meeting them, you're meeting their representative.
Right. Now you're one further step removed.
That's right. Now you're really out there, because now you're locating somebody on one of these dating sites, and then you're entering into some sort of turn-based chat conversation, and you're going to be using your AI to send these texts to the other person, who will then use her AI to respond to you. And before you know it, you're not really even involved anymore.
Yeah, and that sounds a lot like this thing I've been seeing. I saw it as tongue-in-cheek, but then I realized I've actually seen it in the real world, of somebody in the office writes it in bullet point, the memo, sends it to AI and says, write this in language, prose form, sends it out. The person who receives it gives it to AI and says, put this in bullet form.
There's only so much of that you're going to be able to do.
But I want to go back to this deep fake thing. I cannot defend it if the person is going to eventually meet these people on the other end in person, because clearly he's misrepresenting himself. However, if the interactions are only ever going to be via computer, I honestly don't see the problem here.
There might not be one, but nonetheless, it smells wrong.
It does. Let me push it a little bit further. Recall Stephen Hawking. Right? He would type however he managed to type, and he had an electronic voice that would then speak what he had typed. That's different than what we're talking about here, but very similar.
I think everybody's going to carve out an exception for a disability every time. Right? My intuition tells me that there's a problem here. And I usually trust my initial instincts. They're usually pretty good.
You may be right. I just don't know where the line gets drawn.
Nor do I, and I suspect that's something we're going to have to figure out over time, but we'll just throw it on that pile of things that we need to figure out that we never actually get around to figuring out.
And isn't that interesting? Because you say we're going to figure it out over time, and we do. This is one of those things that we don't know what the protocol is, what's considered polite or impolite or that, but through trial and error, we'll figure this out.
I think that's right. And, speaking of trial and error, I got something really interesting came across my desk today. Did you know that there's a new automobile company called Slate Auto that is going to be selling electric vehicles? Have you ever even heard of this?
No, never have.
I haven't either. But apparently it's backed by Jeff Bezos. It's an electric pickup truck. Does that sound somehow familiar? That turns into an SUV when you want it to. Gets about 150 miles on a single charge, which, admittedly is not enough for most people, but for some it will be. But here's the interesting part, Ant. With the various tax credits that you'd be able to get when you buy it, the cost is $20,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
We'll throw an article in the show notes for you so you can see the pictures. I am not immediately repulsed by this. And the more I look at it, the more I might like to have one. And the more I might like to have one, the more I realize that 150 miles just isn't enough.
No, it's not. And I'll tell you, I bought last year an all-electric, a Toyota, and its stated mileage is 250. And it doesn't get 250. It gets maybe, I'd say, 200 in normal use, which is okay. And particularly here in the Washington area, there's plenty of chargers. It's not a big deal. But to go more than a couple hours on a trip, it's a problem.
Yeah. No, if I can't get from Tucson to Phoenix and back to Tucson, there's literally no way in hell I'm ever buying this thing.
Although I will tell you, I took mine this past week from here in Northern Virginia up to State College, PA. It was a 3-hour, 45-minute drive. And I had to stop on the way to charge. But I stopped at one of these super fast chargers. It was, I kid you not, James, I drove in there, the battery's down to 50%, plugged it in, went in, got a cup of coffee, walked out, stretched my legs a little bit, got back in the car. It was at 80%.
Oh, so things are getting better on that front.
It was astounding. Yeah. Almost as good as filling up with gas.
I could see in the not too distant future owning an electric car. It's just not there yet. For where I live and how I drive, it's not there yet.
Yeah, the big plus that I find is the ability to accelerate faster than anybody else on the road. So, if I want to get into a space that's closing, no problem. Step on the gas, there I am. Although the problem is, and maybe I told you this story, I had to rent a car recently and it was a gas-powered one. And I forgot. And I did that. Stepped on the gas to, pull out in front of somebody and the thing is not moving.
Anyway, we all just learned how Antony will die soon.
Right.
And, I'm all right with it. We've had a good run.
But let me complain. I am not happy with this, what did you call it? The rebate thing that goes with it?
Tax credit. Yeah.
The tax credit. Yeah, and those things are gargantuan, like multi-thousands of dollars. Look, call it what it is. The government is forcing your neighbors to partially pay for your car.
It's a subsidy. There's no way around that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a massive subsidy.
And government is always in the business of picking winners and losers. So, you should think twice about all these things. But, that, of course, Ant, brings us to the foolishness of the week. And I wanted to keep it in the automotive wheelhouse, right? We've got this ridiculous piece of technology that you can now have for $20,000 or so. But Toyota, and we've talked about this in passing before, so this is old news. I just wanted to highlight it for a minute before everybody forgets. Toyota makes a very small and very affordable work truck. It's called the Hilux Champ, and it goes for $13,000 new.
You're kidding me. This is gas.
Yeah, very basic, stripped down. I don't even think it comes with a radio.
I didn't think it was possible to get a new car in this country for much less than $20,000.
Yeah, you can't. It's available everywhere else but here.
Oh, you're kidding. Really?
Yeah.
It's only outside the U.S.
Outside the U.S., you could buy a $13,000 Toyota truck and presumably drive it for the same 350,000 miles every other Toyota product lasts for. Or you can live here and not have access to it at all. And I don't know what's more foolish than that.
Well, you're feeling here directly the cost of the regulation that we place on cars and trucks. And you say, well, it's for safety and saving lives. Okay, fine. I'm not going to argue with that, but I'm going to point out all of that comes at a cost. And here, you just underlined it in at least 4 digits.
Ant, I want to ask the obvious question. Okay, if this is all done in the name of safety, how unsafe is this vehicle?
Right, yeah, good question.
Do we have evidence from around the world that people are dying wholesale in these vehicles? Spoiler alert, no, we don't.
Yeah.
It's a Toyota product. It's reliable. It's safe. It just doesn't meet United States standards, which are absurdly high in every respect. So, we don't have the option. Lots of other places do.
For one-stop shopping for all things James and Ant, visit our website, wordsandnumbers.org. We give a special shout-out to our Patreon sponsors who help us keep the lights on. If you'd like to contribute, go to patreon.com/wordsandnumbers.
This week, I want to talk about insurance. And this comes about from one of our listeners, Alex Miner, posted on Words and Numbers Backstage a question pretty much innocuous: how much are you willing to pay per month for car insurance? But it sparked an entire conversation about insurance. I was surprised at the number of people who were saying that, well, basically insurance is just a scam and there's no point in purchasing it in the first place. And so in any event, I thought we should do an episode and maybe begin with a discussion of what insurance is and what it isn't.
Most people are going to be a little confounded by this because it's very hard to describe what insurance is, given that we have medical insurance, we have automotive insurance, we have home insurance, we have renter's insurance. There's a number of different things that fall under the title insurance, and they all, I think, achieve relatively different ends.
Yeah, in fact, I would argue that the thing that people think of when they use the word insurance is not what economists would call insurance at all.
All right, well, let's start with what you think they think.
What I think, when people use the term insurance, more often than not, they're using it in terms of medical care or dental care or eye care or something like that. And more often than not, what they're pointing to is not really insurance. It's more like a prepayment system. So anytime you have a cost that's foreseeable and it's ongoing, so yeah, you get your teeth cleaned every 6 months, or you go for a doctor's checkup periodically, or you have something and you take some medicine, and you need a prescription on a regular basis. All these things are foreseeable. They don't qualify as insurance in the sense that an economist would use the term. So really what you're doing with this stuff is prepaying. So your employer takes out a bunch of money from your paycheck and you can walk into the doctor and say, yeah, I get all this treatment for free. No, you don't. You've already paid for it. You just paid for it through your paycheck and you never saw it.
I always typify this as the difference between what I would call insurance on the one hand and coverage on the other.
That's a good distinction. Yeah.
You want to be covered for certain things, right? And, if we're going to think about medical insurance, you might want to be covered for birth control. You might want to be covered for the flu shot, right? These sorts of things. Insurance, on the other hand, is something that you should want or think you need to cover catastrophic losses.
Yeah.
Right? You're hedging your bet by paying a little bit. Think of it in terms this way. You're very successful. Everything's going well. You don't want to lose it all. Okay, you'll pay a little bit off your top line to ensure your bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
That seems exactly right. So sticking with the healthcare example, I don't want coverage, but if one of my children breaks a leg, right, something that's going to cause me to lose my house because the payments are so high. Well, okay, that's the kind of coverage I want. I want catastrophic coverage. And I'll tell you, Ant, when the Affordable Care Act, boy, if ever there was a misnomer. Anyway, when the Affordable Care Act, and I've said this before, and every single time I say it, Obama partisan hacks come out of the woodwork to tell me how wrong I am. But I'm the one who lived through it, so I guess you're just going to have to trust me on this. When I ended up getting relieved of my employment, when I was working at Strata some years ago when I lived in Utah. And, of course, the healthcare mandate was in place. You had to have healthcare according to the government standards, not your own.
Right.
Or you're going to be fined, and the fine was not insignificant. And in order for me, the cheapest policy I could get, when you take into account both the premiums and the deductibles, I was going to be into that policy for $35,000 before a single thing was covered.
Right.
That's not what I wanted. That's not what I needed, but that's what the government decided I had to have. I, of course, couldn't afford that. So instead of getting what I wanted and could have afforded, I got nothing.
Right. Yes.
Which is always how these things work, right? And we all walked around holding our breath until I found another job.
Yeah, and this is astounding. It's the same phenomenon that we talk about with the minimum wage. You raise the minimum wage and a bunch of people end up losing their jobs. They go from earning a low wage to earning no wage at all. In your case, from mediocre insurance to no insurance.
Right. So why are we talking about insurance?
Well, we're talking about insurance because I want to make an argument that I think is clearly shows that insurance is valuable, probably to most everybody except crazy people who just absolutely love the prospect of risk. But to talk about it, we've got to take off the table what you described as coverage. That we're not talking about day-to-day predictable stuff. That's not insurance. That's coverage. Now, I'm going to back off here for a moment because you used an example a moment ago of birth control and something else, and someone who is disagreeing with us could stop you and say, but wait a minute, I'm covered for whatever it is, some medicine that I require, insulin, for example. I'm covered for insulin, and if you take that coverage away, then this is my life that we're talking about. Clearly, I should have access to this insulin. And where coverage is concerned, not insurance, where coverage is concerned, you're paying for that insulin already. You're just not aware of it.
That's right.
It's coming out of your paycheck, dollar for dollar, the amount that ends up going to the insurance company for the insulin. In fact, I would argue you're probably actually paying more.
Let's face it, the insurance company can't go broke.
Right, yes, exactly.
It'll never pay out more than it takes in.
Yes, and people look at that statement that you just said, that is absolutely correct, and they conclude that insurance then is a scam.
Yeah, that's right.
But they're missing the point of insurance. So first point, the insurance company is not going to go broke. It's going to take in whatever is necessary to cover its expenses, which means if you're dealing with coverage, you're paying for that regardless, whether you have the insurance or not. You're going to pay on the back end or the front end. But when we're talking about actual insurance, you use the example of catastrophic health care. Or think about home insurance. You have a house that's worth, pick a number, $300,000. And if that house burns down, that's it. You're homeless. You don't have $300,000 to buy another house.
Worse than that, you probably owe some money on that other house, which
yeah.
you're going to have to pay regardless.
And that's, as a side note, I was astounded to run across a discussion recently in which there were adults who thought that if your house burns down, you don't have to pay the mortgage anymore.
Well, I mean, you don't.
I guess you could try and skip town, but you're legally obligated to pay it. I mean, they're going to come after you.
You're never going to get another mortgage.
Right, yeah.
Right, there's all kinds of little problems that come along with that behavior. But we see this day in and day out. I've watched at least a half a dozen videos today about people who claim that they had $50,000 worth of student loans. They've paid on them for 10 years, and now they owe $93,000, and these sorts of things. And you say, well, that can't be. And then you listen a little more, and they say idiotic things like, I went into payment hiatus for these 2 years. Or they say, I had a payment that was somehow delineated by my income.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's not how loans get paid back.
Yeah.
That's how debts continue to accrue. And as long as people miss the obvious, and these are obvious things. When people miss the bleeding obvious, I just don't know what to tell them.
Yeah, on the one hand, I feel for them having gotten into a loan situation, not understanding what they were doing. On the other hand, it's their own fault. It's not like this is esoteric knowledge that's hidden from the public.
Well, look, use your own experience with just reading Facebook and Twitter. Not even interacting, just reading. People will say the dumbest without even spending 30 seconds looking into it. Well, is it any surprise that these same people can't figure out how loans work or what insurance is for? How confusing can it be when you see what they're capable of or what they're not capable of? Maybe more to the point.
Now, we should be careful here because there is an observation bias. The people that we're hearing about are the people who didn't know what they were doing, had this situation of all of a sudden they thought they had a $50,000 loan, now they have a $90,000 loan. But we're hearing about it because they posted on Facebook. The people who did know what they were doing and paid their loans down properly, well, they don't post about it on Facebook, or if they do, nobody shares it.
Look, I understand. My point is a larger one. When I look at the online ecosystem, I don't see a lot of intelligent, measured responses to much of anything. I just don't see people acting all that intelligently. So when we come to the ridiculous conclusion that people don't understand insurance, why would they? Look, I saw at least 50 people tell me in the last week or so that the price of eggs has dropped 93% since Donald Trump took office. And what did they used to cost? $47 a dozen?
Right.
It just doesn't pass the smell test. And yet, all he has to do is say it, and everybody reports it.
Well, I'm with you, and now I'm going to pick on the other side, people on the right.
Go ahead. I don't like them either.
People on the right sharing that meme about AOC is worth $20 million.
Oh, you're not picking on the other side here, Ant. This is the same side.
Oh, it's...
But no, that's right. It takes... Look, congressmen have to report every damn thing about their finances. It's actually,
right. This is all public information, yeah.
The reporting is onerous on them.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't even want them to do it. It's so ridiculous. And yet they do it. And all you have to do is go look it up because it's all public record. And when you repaste a meme saying, AOC has $19 million, how did she get that on a salary of $174,000? Well, she didn't. You're an idiot. And you could have looked it up, but you didn't, which makes you a willful imbecile. You want to be stupid. Now...
Well, no, I wouldn't say people want to be stupid.
Oh, no, they want to be stupid.
No, they enjoy sending out things that affirm their preconceptions.
I point out every single time they do it that they've made a mistake and that they're acting like morons, and that the correct thing to do would be to correct that mistake. How many of the hundreds of them that I have told this, how many of them have actually done that? Correct answer? Surprisingly, one.
Oh, really? One?
I know you wanted to say zero, and I would have wanted to say zero too. But one guy on Facebook tagged me in a note, and he said, "Thank you, Mr. Harrigan. I had no idea. I've read up on this, and it was fascinating."
Wow. How about that?
Boy, that's like sighting a pterodactyl in downtown Phoenix.
Huh.
An apology on the internet. What the hell's going on in this world?
Let's get back to insurance, because I'm going to go back to your statement once again where you said the insurance company is not in the business to lose money. It's going to charge more than it pays out, period. Okay, and that's the source of people saying insurance is a scam. And here's the example I want to point to that underlines, I think, people who would say that are misunderstanding how insurance works. So let's go back to your example of you've got a house that's worth $300,000. And if this thing burns down, not only do you still owe whatever's left on the mortgage, but now you don't have a house and you don't have $300,000 to go buy another one. So basically you're homeless at this point. Now, that $300,000, what do you do with this? This is a potential risk that is unrecoverable. It is so large that if this event hits you, your house burns down, you're just done for. Now, here's the thing. The probability of that happening is really low. Let's say it's 0.1% each year. 0.1%. Well, if you do the math, then if an insurance company charged you and everybody like you $300 a year, then the insurance company would break even. Now, the insurance company is not going to break even. It's in the business to make a profit. So it's going to charge you $400 a year. Now, someone can look at that and say, well, wait a minute. The probability of my house burning down is 0.1%. It's going to cost me $300,000, which I don't have. So you do the math. That should be $300 a year. And here's this nasty insurance company charging me $400 a year. The fact is, I think almost everybody would happily pay that. Because you as the homeowner, you're not in the business of having the thing break even to pay out as much as you're going to receive back on average, because you're dealing with an event that likely will never happen at all. You're in the business of being protected on the odd chance that it does.
Right. There are things in this world, lightning, fireworks, electrical problems, right? They happen. Sometimes houses burn down. I don't think for a second that my house is going to burn down. I really don't.
Right. Yeah.
But I pay the insurance every year. Don't think twice about it. I don't get agitated about it. That seems to me to be money very well spent.
Yeah.
And it costs me pennies upon pennies on the dollar to insure for the full value of my house. And every bit as importantly, its contents.
Right.
Right. Every single thing I own is under this roof, including my cars. Right. Literally everything under this roof.
But the weird thing is, people who make it all through life and their house didn't burn down, and they'll look backwards and they'll say, all of that money I spent on insurance was wasted.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, people say this, but that's beyond stupid.
Yeah, but it wasn't wasted, because what happened is you came through all of your life and your house didn't burn down, but it might have. And that's what you were paying for, the might have.
Yeah, and Alex Miner, when he brought this up, it was an event that we had at Words and Numbers Backstage. You and I go online and hang out every now and again. We should do it more often, but we do it some. And it was at one of these that Alex said, well, what's it worth to you to insure your car? And that's a question that most people never confront, right? Because the companies tell them what the rates will be, and you could shop around, but you're always going to be within that range.
Right.
All right, what's it worth to you? New cars cost $40,000.
Right.
Can you afford to lose one the day you buy it?
Mm-hmm.
I can't. I just can't. And no dealer will let you drive off the lot without insurance.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yes.
It's illegal for them to do so. So important is it that we've mandated it everywhere. and we still think it's a pretty good idea. And things that we mandate everywhere are rarely good ideas. And yet here we are. So, Ant, what would it be worth it to you to insure your car?
To insure my car, I would say, I'm thinking to myself, how much would I have to put aside per year to have a buffer?
Let me ask you a different question. But before you answer this one, what's your deductible?
Oh, now deductible is something I wanted to talk about. My deductible is very high. Whatever the highest is, I think it's like $2,000.
Because I have a $1,000 deductible, which is the highest I could get with the company I'm with. And it never occurred to me not to have that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because any loss I take on a car, I can come up with $1,000.
Right. Yeah. And in exchange, your premiums are lower.
Oh, much lower.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because what does the auto insurance company know they're not going to get out of me? A bunch of $300 claims.
Right. Yes. But not only that, not only are you not going to submit minor claims, you're going to drive more carefully.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know that if anything happens, you're immediately out $2,000.
Yeah, and look, these are meaningful amounts, 2 for you, 1 for me. I don't want to lose $1,000 because I rear-ended somebody.
Yeah.
Right? Or, you know how it goes, right? This is your deductible. You're going to pay it. So, okay, we've both decided that a pretty high deductible, that's an acceptable expense. That's an acceptable risk. Let's move over to the premiums, right?
Yeah, let's look at that for a moment. You say it's an acceptable risk, and it's acceptable because there's a portion of that risk that you and I have control over because of our driving habits. And I'm comfortable, and you're comfortable, that we can compensate enough for the risk to make it worthwhile. The odds of us having an accident are low enough that we can get away with the $1,000 deductible. It's going to happen very infrequently.
And I haven't had an insurance claim for decades.
No, nor have I. Well, I guess my last one was my wife hit a deer.
That deer.
Completely totaled the vehicle.
Yeah, but there wasn't a lot of life left in that vehicle.
There wasn't, and, thankfully, insurance kind of regards those things as an act of God. The deer just jumps out of nowhere. There's nothing you can do about this.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, look, how much is insurance worth to you?
Yeah, so back to that question. How much would I pay? I'm going to say I would easily pay on the one car $3,000 a year.
That's a lot. That's way more than I pay in reality.
Yeah, and I'm being charged much less than that.
I think, and look, I'm still bitter over the very high costs of insurance I faced as a young man.
Mm-hmm.
Young men just get hammered with insurance costs.
Right.
So leaving that to the side, I think I only pay like $600 a year as it is.
Mm-hmm. Right, so it's actually quite a deal.
Literally doesn't piss me off at all.
Right.
There are very few things I can say that about. Mm-hmm. I'm angry about almost everything. Every time somebody comes at me with his hand reaching for my wallet, I get very testy. I mean, you want to talk about my $100 a year HOA fee? It's barely anything, right? $100, $200 a year. Man, I would go to war with these people tomorrow if I could get away with it.
And you're paying them $100 or $200 a year so that they can come and tell you it's time to paint your house.
Paint your house, that's right. That $200 a year cost me $10,000 when I had to paint the house. And then once the house was painted, let's not forget the $5,000 it took to get the acceptable light fixtures up. You laugh, man. You laugh. And people say, well, how could it cost you $5,000 for light fixtures? Well, I need 29 of them to start with. That's quite a few. Then somebody has to come and do it. I was still with the cane at that point. Putting me up on a ladder would have been a death sentence for me. And then there's, of course, all the HOA fees I had to pay because the light fixtures did not get put up in a timely fashion. I'm 15 grand into painting this house. That irritates me beyond all repair. Car insurance? No.
Let's shift gears on insurance for a minute. We haven't yet talked about how insurance companies charge different people different prices for the same thing. Actually, you touched on it when you said, and I have the same experience, that male teenagers are charged way more than females.
Yeah, I wanted to buy a new car when I was 20-ish, and I could have afforded a new car with relative ease. I was working my ass off at the time, probably working 60, 70 hours a week, no real expenses, and I thought, hell, I'll buy a nice car for myself. And I went out and I found a number of candidates, and I called up the insurance company, and they were informing me that my insurance, and mind you, Ant, this is in the late 1980s, was going to be over $3,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's $3,000? It was actually $3,250. What is that in 2025 dollars?
From the 80s, 20s. Oh, heck, James, that can't be right, because it would be, your prices double roughly every 20 to 25 years. And that was 40 years ago. You're going to be up around $10,000.
Ain't that something? I've just taken a look at the dollar times, and they tell me it would be like $9,200.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, these are the figures.
Yep.
This is why I did not buy a car for decades. I didn't get my first new car until I was in my 50s.
Now, on the one hand, we can complain about it, and it seems completely unfair. But on the other, look, statistically, it's very clear that teenage males have all manner of accidents that teenage females don't.
I get it. I agree. So stipulated. But I did have a choice, right? My choice was not to play that game at all. Mm-hmm. So I didn't. I mean, I wasn't going to give them that kind of money. I went out and bought a used car that I didn't care if it got trashed tomorrow. I'd just go buy another $600 used car the day after. This was back in the days when you could actually buy a crappy car for $600.
Right.
But there's a deeper problem here, right? Because, okay, fine, we're going to hold hostage an entire group of people to the statistics of their demographic. I don't know how else to put that. Oh, I do. Discriminate. We're going to discriminate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, discrimination is an ugly, ugly word. Nobody cares when men, or young men, boys maybe, have to pay more than women or girls. What if it were black men? And only black men? What if we could show with 100% certainty that black men were, now let's pick one out of the air, 11 times more likely to have accidents than white men, and 27 times more likely to have accidents than white women, etc., etc. Is that okay? Can they charge more then?
Well, I mean, they can't, because it's expressly against the law at that point.
It is, but don't black men pay higher medical premiums?
Do they? If they do, that's news to me. And I'm not arguing one way or the other. I just have no knowledge on that.
The demographics are such that.
Yeah, the demographics are such that, life expectancy for black males is, I think, the lowest of all the various gender and race groups.
That's right. We get to it often because black men typically don't even live long enough to collect Social Security.
Yeah, the expected rate of return on Social Security for a black male is like negative 5% or something. It's actually in the negatives. They end up paying more into it than they get back, precisely because their life expectancy is so low.
Yeah. And, you can split things up and divide them all day long. Sooner or later, you're going to have to say, okay, this is an acceptable differentiation and that isn't. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have to offer your reasons, and you're going to have to convince people to go along with it. That's about the best you can say on the matter.
Well, I want to touch on one of the things that was the impetus behind Obamacare, and that's pre-existing conditions.
Yeah.
And that kind of plays here, that you've got some malady It's a pre-existing condition. You go to get insurance, and the insurance company is going to charge you a gargantuan amount because you're like the teenage boy that,
I, for example, would be uninsurable at this point.
Yeah, and on the one hand, you can look at that and say, well, clearly this is a higher risk person, so we should charge them more. On the other hand, it bothers us morally. We want everybody to be paying the same insurance.
I mean, look, I've been diagnosed with several very powerful diseases. Nobody would say that they're my fault, right? But everybody would say, correctly so, that those are James problems. Those are me problems, not you problems, right? Mm-hmm. And yet we are very uncomfortable saying that this class of problem, the pre-existing condition problem, we are very, very loath to say, and you're just going to have to deal with that.
Yep.
And I want to at least put a nod towards what we talked about last week, right? Because I think it actually plays here. I think that when we think about medical issues, we think in terms not unlike the veil of ignorance. What system would we want if we had no idea how healthy we were going to be individually? We know what good health is and we know what disease is, right? We know all the details. We just don't know how those details apply to us. And I think in the realm of healthcare, we're trying to satisfy that question. Mm-hmm. We're not trying to satisfy other questions, right? We're not trying to figure out how everybody pays exactly what it costs. We wouldn't be talking about insurance in the first place if we were doing that.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. My concern is, it is not enough of a concern to overcome what you're saying, but it is a concern. And that is the person who will act irresponsibly. So I'm not going to buy insurance so that I have more money to go and spend on other things. And then I come down with some serious illness, and then I go to get the insurance. You're not really getting insurance at this point. You're getting a free handout.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't know what to make of this, right? I know what a free market in healthcare would look like. I know that pre-existing conditions are the granddaddy of all problems to that system. And we're forever trying to square the circle because, and I think only because, we went years ago and attached healthcare and health insurance to employment.
Yeah, that was stupid.
It was stupid because now if you lose your employment through no fault of your own, you also lose your insurance. Once you lose your insurance, if you have a pre-existing condition, no other insurance company will ever take you.
Or even worse than that, James, something happens to you that prevents you from working. And so you lose your health insurance, and now you can't get insurance because of the thing that caused you to lose insurance.
Yeah, and you do end up in this, feedback loop a lot of times.
Right.
And I don't know that there's a good way out of it. I think that the only way out of it, even if it were a way out, would be to start unraveling every aspect of the problem, trimming away at the edges as best you could over time to try and make right what was befouled by government intrusion into markets.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Health insurance should be completely separate, like your car insurance or your home insurance. Those things don't come through your employer.
No, and there's no good reason that they should.
Right.
There's a historical reason, but there's not a good reason. And I think we've covered it on other podcasts, and if we haven't, we'll get to it some one of these days soon. But, I mean, look, the interesting thing is I want to insure my life. I want many different aspects of my life insured. But here's the thing. I only want it insured because I have something to lose.
Right.
Insurance is always against loss. That's the very nature of the thing. It's not to make sure you get your flu shot. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, that's a nice byproduct. Go get your flu shot if you want. Now all the anti-vaxxers will be in touch again. Okay, whatever. We'll get to that soon enough, too. RFK Jr. is going nuts, making a mess of a lot of things. Trust me, we'll get to it. But, young people who don't have anything don't really require nearly as much insurance. And it just so happens their health is better, which means they don't need near as much insurance. And that's something.
Yeah, and they're precisely the ones that, if you left them alone, would choose not to have insurance until it became a problem. Well, now you got the pre-existing condition.
That's right. And then there's this other problem where we have to take old people like you and me, and we have to democratize our risk. Right. This is the only way insurance works. And you can make a case that this is reminiscent of a Ponzi scheme, because it is. Right. It always requires more healthy people paying in than it has sick people taking claims out. This is an absolute requirement. So we've decided that, old people will sooner or later die and they'll stop costing us a lot of money, and young people will keep being born. But with declining birth rates and declining fertility rates, you're going to see a problem with insurance markets as well. Because you'll just have fewer people through which to democratize your problem.
Right.
And every time that happens, the price of whatever you're trying to deal with goes up.
Yeah, you used the word democratize. I would use the word diversify, and that's exactly what it is. It's just like diversifying a portfolio of stocks.
You could call it socializing.
Sure.
In a lot of ways, that's really what we're up to as well. I think diversify is not a bad word to use here. It doesn't catch everything, but it catches more than the others do, I think. I'd have to give that some thought, but what are we going to do is always the problem. People need certain things. We've mandated certain other things, and then we've thrown wrenches into the gears of the market.
And then when it doesn't work, we blame the market.
That's right. That's right. It's all the market's fault. Those greedy capitalists.
Well, and that's interesting because, I've heard a number of people over the years say about, these, the profits for insurance companies should be capped and insurance companies shouldn't make all this money and this and that. I am very happy when my insurance company turns a profit, because that means it's going to be able to pay out if I have a problem.
Yeah.
Think about the hurricane that went through North Carolina and Georgia just not even 6 months ago. Billions with a B of dollars that insurance companies had to pay out. And I'm sure everybody there was incredibly thankful that those insurance companies had buffers like that. In fact, they didn't have the entire buffers because insurance companies buy insurance for themselves. But nonetheless, somebody was sitting on piles of cash that they can cough out at that point.
Yeah. And, my first thought when I watched the fires go through Los Angeles not too terribly long ago was, are those insurance companies going to be able to make the payments? Will they have the money to make the payments? And, I don't want to get too into the weeds here. There's this thing, reinsurance, which is a very interesting market that, looks to diversify risk yet again. And every step you take down that road makes it more likely that these businesses will, in fact, have enough money to pay out the claims when they get them. But there is a level of catastrophe that's so high that no insurance company could pay it.
Yeah, and this has happened. What we're discussing happened in that fire. I think it was State Farm said they were pulling out of California. Maybe it wasn't State Farm, but it was one of them. Because, California had passed a law saying that the insurance companies can't raise their rates.
Sure, but that's different than saying they can't afford to make the payments on the fires for the people who had in good faith paid their premiums.
Oh, yeah, I would imagine they can afford to make the payments on these fires. But
and then get out.
Whoever it was did the math and said, we're not going to be able to next time, so we're leaving.
And look, I ask all the time on this very podcast why anybody would do business in California. I don't think it's worth it to live with all the regulations. I know it's a gigantic market, a very well-heeled market. It seems like a very annoying market, too, and that plays every bit as much as profit.
Yep.
So, I don't know where we land with all of this stuff. We said a lot of words without coming to any conclusions.
The conclusion I would submit is that insurance is absolutely worthwhile. And I think there are edge cases where it isn't, but those edge cases you will tend to find are crazy people. for 99.99% of the population, yeah, insurance is worthwhile. Now, we can argue about how much at what price and all of that, but what it's doing is protecting you against an unrecoverable loss.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And when I think of insurance, that's what I think of. I want to be covered in case of dire circumstances.
Right.
Right. We find out I have brain cancer tomorrow. Well, yeah, I'd like to be on top of that. If I have to go to the urgent care to have, a hangnail dealt with, that's just not the same thing.
Yeah.
Next week, Ant, we have a special request. Our friend and pharmacist, Phil, should I try to pronounce this last name? Sibigtaroth.
Oh, Phil.
Or however the hell you pronounce that. He would like us to talk about pharmacists. But I've had so many encounters, for them, near-death encounters, for me, near-prison encounters. I don't think we should talk about pharmacists. So, Phil, sorry, man. We can't do it.
Is Phil a pharmacist?
Yes.
We should have him on. Let him defend himself.
Way to pay attention. Well,
I thought you were introducing it to have him on, and then you said we're not talking to pharmacists.
Yeah. And that's all I got for today. But on that happy note, Ant, note that I did not kill the pharmacists. Why? Well, fear of prison is one thing, but I also extended a little bit of grace. I was nice to them. And everybody should be nice to each other. Be nice to each other. It doesn't take that much. See you next weekend.
See you next week, James.